Welcome to Frog TV. I'm Tony Silva, and in this new series, which I like to call Pura Vida Profiles, I'm going to invite guests to come on and chat with me about living down here in Costa Rica. Who am I, you might ask? Well, I'm one of the founders of Costa Rican Vacations, and I've been an expat here for the past 17 years. I'm going to talk to a fun, diverse range of expats to cover everything you want to know about Costa Rica. Today, our first guest is someone who I've known for over 15 years. He came down to Costa Rica 20 years ago and is originally from New Jersey. He runs an English school called Idioma Internacional and is married to a Colombian woman with 2 kids. They live in a suburb here in Costa Rica. So, without further ado, please welcome our guest, Mr. Brian Logan. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Tom.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, all.
All right, come on. So as I was giving that introduction, I started thinking, I know so much about you over 15 years. But one of the things I don't know is why you came down here in the first place. So why did you come down?
I came down, same reason as a lot of people. Granted, this is 20 years ago, 1996. I came down initially to learn Spanish. I have Cuban heritage, so my whole life I've always had interest in learning Spanish and learning about Latin culture. Came for the obvious reasons: politically stable, safe, beautiful weather, nice people. Was the choice I made, and I'm really glad I did. So really it was to learn Spanish more than anything.
One of the things that I always like to know is when you got down here, what was the biggest culture shock you had?
I think the language.
Yeah.
I didn't speak much when I got here, so I stayed with a homestay in Alajuela. Just living with a homestay, not being able to speak English, being in another country, which I had never done before. Yeah. I'd traveled, but I never lived in another country. Thankfully, I'll tell you a funny story. I was studying Spanish during that first month when I was at the homestay. And at the school, the teachers in the first day in the orientation explained to us how we were probably going to feel. And this really helped me a lot because they said, look, even though you're all adults, it was an adult school, you may feel a little bit strange being here in Costa Rica. It happens to a lot of people, and you may feel like you did when you went to summer camp when you were a kid. You're going to want to go home, you're going to want to feel like you want to be with your family. And, but don't worry, in 2 weeks' time that's going to go away, and you're really going to feel at home here. And so it's true, the first couple of nights when I was at that homestay, I did feel pretty lonely, felt like I did when I was a kid in summer camp, and thought about, going back. But I let the time pass like they had suggested, and I'm glad I did, because 2 weeks later, I felt like this was home. I knew my surroundings. I was picking up the language a little bit. But I think maybe 6, 7 years in, I was considering spending the rest of my life here, because that was never my intention initially coming here. I think after a few years of learning how things work around here and really getting grounded, I think I started opening up to the fact that I'd live the rest of my life here.
What is it that Idioma does?
Well, Idioma Internacional, we provide language support to companies here in Costa Rica. There's been a huge growth in foreign multinationals here through globalization, and we've basically supported companies in that whole growth period. So we provide them with English classes, we provide them with evaluations to understand their language levels, and we partner with companies to help them get their teams to the necessary English proficiencies that their companies require them to be in.
Okay. What was the biggest hurdle you encountered when you were starting a business down here in Costa Rica?
Oh boy. Biggest hurdle I would say is learning how the laws and regulations and culture work here, especially in a business setting, whether it's accounting laws, legal laws, starting the company, structuring it, and then having the contacts and knowing enough to get things done. So that takes a while, and that in part is why I've been reluctant to expand in other countries, just because it's not easy to do. It's a pretty steep learning curve, and once you get accustomed to how things work and you learn about things, obviously it becomes much easier. But I often see people who are here new going through the same experiences that I went through. things are different here. It's a different country, so they do things differently. And it can be, you know, discouraging if you don't understand how that system works. The passing of CAFTA has opened up the telecommunications market. So back then, it was hard just to get a telephone line for our offices. Or if we changed office locations, I remember we couldn't keep our telephone line. That's just one example of many that we'd have to go through back then, but now that's not an issue. Technology really has evolved a lot here. So it's definitely a lot easier now than it used to be. But nonetheless, you do have to learn how things work.
Talking about the telephone lines, I was thinking about when we first started, we had dial-up. You know, you still remember that, you know, the crackly AOL, you've got mail kind of stuff. And, you know, that's changed quite a bit. You know, now we've got high-speed internet, and I remember when my sister was going to come down here to visit, and she had really not been out of Minnesota, she had just kind of had an idea in her mind that people were going around with ox carts, and there were no cars, and they're all dirt roads. And so whenever you talk to your friends, do you ever get, you know, kind of this idea that they have no idea where Costa Rica is, or they're confused where it's at?
Well, you have people who have never been here and don't know much about it, who are completely ignorant, thinking that it's even an island.
Right.
I've heard that a lot, right? Like Puerto Rico and Costa Rica. So you get some of that, but you don't find that as much anymore because it's much more known than it used to be. But I think what's interesting, a coworker of mine who left the company 6 years ago just came down 2 weeks ago to visit. And so he was able to witness everything that's changed since he's been here. That's just the last six years. And I think that so much has improved and changed just in that short period of time that it's hard, I think, for people to understand really what's going on. I think the complaints and the perception of Costa Rica in the past was that things are really inefficient, the roads are terrible, the infrastructure is you know, like a third world, but those are all areas that really have changed. So the streets now are in good condition, relatively speaking. I mean, I don't consider them to be a real problem. You got the new highway going out to the beach. Technology is pretty much everywhere. Wireless internet. They have really affordable, you know, cell and 3G service here, and so the, you know, business environment is a lot more modern now than it used to be. And I think it's kind of on par in a lot of places in the States. And so I think that my friends who don't know much about Costa Rica, or even ones that were here as recent as, you know, 5 or 8 years ago, don't know the Costa Rica of today. Costa Rica of today is a different story. And so the growth is staggering. It really is, especially going outside of the city and all the suburb areas outside of the city. But it's exciting because that development brings new services, brings new opportunities. You can tell that the country's doing well. Unemployment is low. Salaries are increasing, and so the country is heading in the right direction.
Now, all that said, you're right about all that stuff. There must be one or two things that still, I guess, bother you a little bit. That's a little frustrating about Costa Rica. I can name a couple, but you know, obviously those things are outweighed by the great things. Tell me one.
Well, I can't separate myself from running the business here too. So there are things that frustrate me as a business person here, just because of the labor laws. But you know, to be honest, I can't think of, and maybe it's frustrating that for good education for my kids, that I need to pay for private schools. That's one of the things I you know, would like here and would benefit from in the States, is if you know, I'd probably be sending my kids to public school there. So you know, that's a little bit frustrating, knowing that I'm going to be paying for, you know, 12 years of private school education in addition to university. So.
That said, though, and this is something that I know from my own kids, I believe at least. You can tell me what you think about this. I know your kids are a couple years younger than ours. 3 and 6, right? Yeah. Ours are 12 and 13. So, as far as the education system, my kids are learning all sorts of things. You know, they're in 6th and 7th grade, and they're learning things that I didn't learn until I was in 9th grade in English. So, as far as the quality of education, at least in the private schools here, I think it's quite good.
Yeah, I think it's good. I don't think we can compare it to how we were educated, because I think technology and methodologies now really educate kids earlier than when we were in school. So my guess is that the same stuff that our kids are learning earlier now here are probably being learned in the States as well at an earlier age. But I agree with your point, is that, you know, even though I am paying for private education, I'm happy with the quality of it. I consider it to be high quality education. For example, my boy right now is in pre-kinder, and he can already read. And so, you know, that's, you know, earlier than I think the norm. Yeah, and the country's changed so much, you know. I really realized it when Mike was just here, my buddy, you know, and it really, because when you're asking about what really kind of peeves you off, I used to get peeved off. So I don't know if it's the country's really improved, or I've learned it better, or the combination of both. But
or sometimes the acceptance, you just kind of say, you know what, this is how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to.
That's what I mean by like accepting it or learning about it. But I mean, what's something that's really frustrated you recently? Wow, less and less. But you know, I can get my phone service efficiently. I do all my banking online. All these things that really bothered me before. Like, what would I have said 10 years ago? Waiting online for my check 2 hours to get my paycheck cash, for example. That you know. But is that even relevant now? No, it's not. I would say and the roads and all that stuff. The roads are fine. They are, right, but the traffic still sucks. It sucks everywhere, though. Yeah. I mean, talk to anyone. My parents are dying in New Jersey. Yeah. My brother's dying in Denver. I mean, traffic's terrible everywhere. Yeah. So, but the roads, I mean, that was the biggest kick. The potholes and this, I mean, when is that ever an issue where you make a real complaint about it? Yeah. I would guess that if we were still back trying to start out again, we'd probably face some of the same frustrations. Sure, yeah. Well, having to learn it all over again, yeah. Some people still say that Costa Rica is kind of the Wild West. Have you ever had any Wild West kind of experiences here where you kind of felt like there was no law and you had to face something and you had to kind of forge your own path? It's a Wild West type of country, but anytime I'm out of San Jose, I feel that way. I'm just fortunate that the country has such good values that in any other place I think I'd feel a little bit at risk or threatened if I were in some real rural area. But it's happened time and time again where I've gotten lost or I've been in some place where there's no one around. And Ticos couldn't be the nicest people, and so hospitable, and really, you know, you don't find danger in these situations where there's not much security or there's no one really there. Yeah, one of the things that I think about, and it was actually quite easy for me, was getting residency. I was able to get it right before 9/11 happened, and then my business partner Casey was in the process also, but for some reason he didn't get it. So it took him years after that before he got his residency. How was the process for you? When I first came down, there were the requirements for residency were a lot more lenient than they are today. Now it's really a bigger challenge to get residency. But back then you could get it. One of the ways you could get it was as an investor. About 2 years after I started the company, I went to apply for residency as an investor. Of course, you know, I had a small little startup that I financed myself and submitted it, and I actually ended up getting residency as an investor back then. Well, when you have residence here, you have to renew it in the beginning every year and then every 2 years. And when we started the company, my partner was the president and I was the vice president. And when I got my residency during that year, my partner left the company. And when he left, my lawyer put me as the president, and then we named a different vice president. Well, unbeknownst to me, I go for a regular checkup at the end of the year to renew my residency. And it turns out they said, well, you originally got your residence as the president of the company, as the vice president. Now you're the president, so you can't get it now under the same conditions. Now you have to reapply. So they made me reapply for my residency all over again from scratch, which is submitting all the paperwork, all the stuff from documents from the States. And when I went to reapply the second time, they had raised the requirements for being an investor, and they rejected my application. So we appealed. because it's unconstitutional actually in Costa Rica to give you residency and then take it away.
Right.
They didn't see it that way, and so they just rejected my appeal also. So I basically was in limbo with a fully functioning company for probably 8 years after that.
Really?
And then finally I got a work visa through my company that I got for a few years, and then I got married and had kids. Once you have kids in Costa Rica, then it's very easy to get residency. And so I, had a bit of an anchor baby myself. So now I got residency back through being a father of 2 Costa Rican children. And I'm happily on my 2-year rotation now. So it's nice to have residency back, believe me.
I bet. Yeah, it's never easy. I mean, I don't think it's that easy. It's one of those things you talked about earlier about the importance of really doing your homework. What's your favorite part of Costa Rica? If you just picked one thing and you said I had to say this, and I love this about Costa Rica, what would it be?
I love San Jose. I do. I've always thought, and I've even said, San Jose isn't a great place to visit, but it's a great place to live. And I feel that way about the beach, but the opposite, where the beach is a great place to visit, but not a great place to live. I've lived at both. My first year that I was here, I lived for a few months at the beach. And, it was a small town, and it felt very small town really quickly. And so San Jose is a great place to live because the weather's so nice, and you have all the conveniences of everything you'd want, the schools and the shopping and the restaurants. It's just beautiful. So I like San Jose, but outside of San Jose, my favorite area is the Nicoya Peninsula. I love it. It's just, I don't get out there much just because it's so remote, but it's just so beautiful out there. The beaches, the communities, everything is amazing. I just don't get out there nearly enough.
Great. All right, well, last question. This is something I want to ask everyone. So as an expat, and as someone thinking about coming down to Costa Rica, not only to visit, but to actually stay and possibly live here, what's the one piece of advice you would give that person?
I would recommend, before making a kind of a long-term decision, to do something for like a year. Maybe come down and live here for a year and see how it goes, and try and put things on hold, rent your house if you own something, or try and take off for a year and experience it first before just closing out completely where you live and moving everything down here. So that's what I would recommend to somebody is try living here first before you do, because it's not for everybody. And it is a different country, but it's such a beautiful country, and so many of us end up staying here that don't even think we're going to. So I don't think there's much really to risk in doing and coming here. It's a safe country, it's beautiful, the people are amazing, it's a highly developing country, and it's just a great place to be and to live. And I really would recommend it to anybody.
Awesome. Solid advice. I like it. Well, Brian, thanks. I really appreciate the honesty and for you coming out. I know you got a busy schedule, so thanks for coming.
Thanks, Tony. Loved it.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And please don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date. We hope to see you next time. I'm Tony Silva for Pura Vida Profiles.